Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the lineage benevolent masters. The profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Next, we discuss the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch. Today we begin with the main text. As I mentioned the day before yesterday, the version of the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch that we are using now is primarily based on the fifth version discussed yesterday, the Zongbao edition. This particular edition is basically divided into 10 comprehensive chapters. Some of these discuss historical aspects, while others specifically focus on the significant chapter of prajna. It also covers topics such as confession, the states experienced in meditation, and so on. These aspects are discussed as well. First, the initial chapter is the chapter on causes and conditions of practice. Causes and conditions of practice refers to the reasons for cultivation at that time and the entire process of practice. This is similar to when we talk about Vajrayana teachings, where we discuss the origin of the transmission, the dependent arising of the Dharma being passed down. Or, as some say, the five perfections. There are such explanations. So let's start with the literal meaning first. I'm not entirely sure if I can explain it well. You all are probably the best at this. Ideally, I should have received a full transmission from a qualified spiritual teacher first, and then it might be better for me to teach it. But there's no time, and I'm not exactly sure who the qualified teacher would be. Everyone is a qualified teacher, I suppose. That's the tone of the Sixth Patriarch. Let's briefly go through the main text first. At that time, the master arrived at Baolin Monastery. The governor of Shaozhou, Wei, along with officials, went into the mountains to invite the master to the Dafan Monastery in the city, and in the lecture hall expounded the Dharma for the assembly. This section talks about, in fact, the main focus of this entire chapter is to discuss back in the day. When the revered Sixth Patriarch first began his profound teaching, he would meticulously give teachings that were perfectly suited to the individual disciples who were present. This, in essence, is precisely what we usually refer to as the five perfections. The first of the five perfections is the perfection of time. Speaking of the profound perfection of time, the ancient Buddhist sutras very clearly state, "Thus have I heard at one particular time on a specific occasion." At one time is essentially like this. It doesn't specify in detail exactly which time it was. Actually, we've mentioned this before when discussing the Diamond Sutra. According to the teachings of the Buddhist scriptures, for us humans it might be a certain year, month, or day, but for different sentient beings there are different times. There is the future, the past, the present, as well as the originally pure time that is beyond any time at all, and so on. We often talk about timelessness, the four seasons, and so on. Here, this also closely resembles the meaning found in esoteric teachings or Buddhist scriptures. In fact, according to the commonly accepted time of that era, it can be understood this way. At one particular time, the revered master, the master here specifically refers to the Sixth Patriarch of Zen Buddhism, went to the ancient Baolin Chan Monastery. At that time in Shaozhou, there was a governor with the surname Wei. Governor was an official title for an official of that period. There were also numerous bureaucrats. These were important officials who consistently accompanied or closely followed him throughout his journeys and endeavors. These two people arrived at Baolin Monastery. Baolin Monastery, a truly revered and ancient place, should be located in the majestic Nanhua Mountain, nestled deeply within its serene and verdant mountains. They, the devoted followers, entered these very mountains to respectfully invite the esteemed master, the Sixth Patriarch Huineng, earnestly requesting him to graciously go to the bustling city. In the city there was a Dafan Monastery, and Dafan Monastery had a lecture hall. They invited the Sixth Patriarch to the lecture hall of Dafan Monastery to expound the Dharma for those with karmic connections, to preach Buddhism. Actually, this is quite simple. When the Sixth Patriarch was in the monastery, two officials came to invite the master. Originally, he was residing in the tranquil monastery situated high on the mountain, and the community respectfully requested him to descend to the venerable Dafan Monastery in order to impart his profound teachings and wisdom. In this particular section, as I have just mentioned, one important thing that will be discussed is the precise timing. Actually, it wasn't specified in detail. You could say it happened at a certain time. If we look at the time based on the beings who were to be taught back then, actually at that time, according to several highly reliable historical sources, it is widely believed that this significant event occurred in the spring season of 677 AD. However, despite these credible accounts, the precise day within that particular spring period was never truly specified or definitively documented. Yesterday we talked about the time of the sixth patriarch's passing, which was in 713 AD. I would estimate that the sixth patriarch was approximately 39 years old at that particular time, indeed, based on the available information. According to related historical records, he had already stayed in the monastery. Some say for 36 years, others say 37 years. So it should have been right after he had first arrived at the Baolin monastery when those two important officials came to personally invite the revered master. The ancient Baolin monastery is now officially known as Nanhua Temple, and it was also historically referred to as Guangguo Temple, a significant and revered site. It seems that after the Song dynasty, it was renamed Nanhua Temple. Before that, it was also known as Zhongxing Temple. And in addition to this, it was also referred to as Fakian Temple. Actually, regarding the origin of this monastery, as we mentioned in the last class, there was a Dharma master named Master Jiao who came from India. After the esteemed Master Jiao, a revered figure from the distant land of India, eventually arrived at this particular location, some historical sources and ancient records indicate that his arrival occurred in the year 502 AD. Once, on a tranquil day, he was drinking water from the flowing currents of the nearby river. He seemed to feel that the water from this little stream was extremely sweet and pure. It was no different from the water of a sacred mountain in India. Then he slowly followed the river steadily upstream. He then diligently followed the winding river upstream, all the way up to its very source or a significant point, and eventually arrived at that particular destination around the tranquil time of dusk, as the sun began to set. After arriving there, he looked around and felt that the mountains and waters were beautiful, and the environment was extremely pleasant. Then, with deep reverence, he earnestly requested that a sacred temple be meticulously constructed there. Consequently, when the actual construction began at this specific location, it should be clearly stated that it was officially named Baolin Temple. From that significant historical time until the present day, specifically from the year 502 AD right up to the current moment, although in history there may have been some ups and downs, as it is said. But no matter what, according to many historical records, it has always existed. In fact, when talking about the origins of many eminent monks and great masters, including some temples, indeed, sometimes there are many mysterious things in Buddhism. This might be a bit hard to imagine for non-Buddhists, but that's just how it is. In the past, when I wrote the records of Mount Wutai, on the surface, many temples on Mount Wutai seem to have been established in a certain year AD, but the descriptions from some historians and academics are completely different. On the other hand, according to the accounts and records of truly great Buddhist masters, in fact, the initial construction of many temples also has very profound causes and conditions. There are also some inconceivable blessings from Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so on. Therefore, when a compassionate Bodhisattva or a great master propagates the profound Dharma in a monastery, even after he leaves this transient world, he still uses his enduring physical body too. While they are still alive and present, their dedicated work in diligently spreading the sacred Dharma is incredibly vast and far-reaching. After they pass away, on one hand, their Dharma treasures. For example, the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, as we all know, in any place in China, as long as there is a Buddhist distribution center, it can be said to be everywhere. His physical body remains even to this day, and so many people truly rely upon his immense and boundless blessings guiding countless sentient beings. At that significant time, these two esteemed officials respectfully invited the Venerable Master, and then subsequently went forth to the sacred monastery. There was a Dafen monastery here, which was actually called Tianning Monastery during the Northern Song dynasty. Later, during the Southern Song dynasty, a significant historical period, it was officially called the Baoen Guangxiao Monastery. This important institution was also consistently located within the vibrant region of Guangdong province. In the lecture hall of this monastery at that time, he was invited to give teachings to everyone. This is indeed the very origin of this significant event. Everyone involved should thoroughly understand the initial circumstances and foundational details. After inviting him there, the master ascended to the seat, and more than 30 officials and bureaucrats, over 20 Confucian scholars, and more than 1,000 monks, nuns, and laypeople all paid their respects together, wishing to hear the essential teachings. Just now, the sixth patriarch, those two invited him into the city. In the lecture hall of the monastery, the Dharma master began to sit on the Dharma seat. At this moment, the assembly gathered before him. Just now, there were the prefect and the officials. The title prefect has many interpretations. Different scholars have different explanations. Officials here are not like what we refer to today as bureaucracy or bureaucratic atmosphere. We encountered this in many of the courses we studied before, especially when we were in middle school. Every day we did homework, which was just bureaucratic assignments. But this is different. Here, it was simply a title, a designation used at that particular historical time. In today's contemporary terms, there were indeed more than 30 highly respected local government officials present at that significant gathering. Furthermore, there were also more than 20 distinguished scholars and revered religious figures who diligently studied Confucianism and the profound teachings of both Confucius and Mencius, as well as dedicated Buddhist monks, devout nuns, young novice monks, aspiring novice nuns, and other committed monastics. There were also respected Taoist priests and numerous ordinary lay people present. Altogether, there were more than 1,000 people present. After the revered Master Huineng took his rightful seat upon the sacred Dharma throne, they all reverently bowed to him at precisely the same time, and then earnestly began to seek the profound Dharma. Actually, this is also the case in Tibetan Buddhism, and even now in India, such practices exist. Out of respect for the Dharma and for the Dharma teacher, generally, after the Dharma teacher takes his seat on the Dharma throne, the disciples bow to him. This is also a common tradition. In Tibetan Buddhism, some individual masters used to have this tradition, but at His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok's place, there is no such tradition. This includes the Paleo Monastic Institute in India. No matter which master it is, including those above the level of counselor, as long as they sit on the Dharma throne, others will bow to them. When I first saw this situation, I thought to myself, if a master sits on the Dharma throne and others bow to him every day, it might be a bit hard to handle. I'm afraid there are many realized bodhisattvas among them. But respect for the Dharma must be shown. So I was thinking everyone should bow together to the Buddha hall. This really should include all of the masters as well. If everyone bows down together, it would be very good indeed. That's precisely the idea I had in mind. Looking back at history, as everyone knows, when Buddhism first entered China, Taoism and Confucianism, which were considered the true native religions of China, had many people who rejected Buddhism. In fact, many government officials even demanded that people not study Buddhism. There were many theoretical debates, especially with Taoism, and the debates were very intense. Looking at the process of these debates in history, it's not that we were dissatisfied with any particular religion, but from a historical perspective, they really couldn't win the debates on a theoretical level. At that time, they even made use of some emperors. This led to the so-called Three Wu suppression of Buddhism movements and so on. From a historical perspective regarding Buddhism, in the Han regions, there was also a constant situation where local people looked down on and belittled it. This kind of attitude has continued to this day. I think even now people often say that Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, these are the roots of traditional Chinese culture. That's what people say. But in reality, there are many research institutes for Confucianism and Taoism in universities. And in the curriculum, there is a lot of content about Confucian and Mencian thought and culture. But as for Buddhism, except for a few schools, it is not allowed to be studied. Among the so-called religions, it seems that Buddhism is the one people are least satisfied with. This kind of attitude still exists today. Even in some prominent political and academic circles, there are indeed such views and perspectives. No matter what, if we carefully look at the historical time period when the sixth patriarch was actively alive and teaching, there must have been a truly great many devoted people who profoundly believed in the profound teachings and spiritual wisdom of the sixth patriarch's particular form of Buddhism. Moreover, at that time, it seems that all religions, from this brief passage, on the one hand, there were people representing the government, people with certain official positions who also believed in Buddhism. At the same time, the flourishing Taoism and Confucianism in China back then, as well as male and female Buddhist monastics and so on. Everyone showed great respect, reverence, and veneration for the Dharma. At the same time, we also know that transportation was not convenient in those days. It wasn't like it is now. Nowadays, if you want to hold a Dharma assembly, you just make a phone call, and many people can gather together right away. Back then, and even now, that place is still considered relatively quiet. In those days, the population wasn't very dense either. For 1,000 people to gather in one place, it must have been because of the sixth patriarch's reputation and his great prestige. At that particular time, people held him in extraordinarily high esteem. That was indeed the prevailing situation. As previously mentioned, After the sixth patriarch reverently arrived at the monastery and subsequently entered the main lecture hall, with such a significant number of individuals, well over 1,000, began to diligently attend the profound lecture. The master addressed the assembly saying, "Good friends, the self-nature of Bodhi is originally pure. Just use this mind and you will directly realize Buddhahood." The entire previous section can be considered an introductory teaching to set the conditions. If we speak in terms of the traditional structure of the text, in the first chapter, the section above is the introductory teaching explaining the causes and conditions. This section, we can say, directly points out the essential doctrine of the school. He directly and clearly reveals the key points of Chan Buddhism, directly pointing out the essentials of the school. After the master took his seat on the Dharma platform, facing everyone, facing over 1,000 people, how did he address everyone? He called them good friends. Next, he directly explained the most profound meaning of Chan Buddhism. You must remember this verse. It's at the very beginning of the Platform Sutra of the sixth patriarch. Just like in some Tibetan Buddhist treatises, the entire text can be encompassed within the vow statement. In this verse, the entire essence of the Platform Sutra of the sixth patriarch is contained. Whether it's called the central thought or the most profound meaning, it's all included here. In other words, the self-nature of Bodhi is originally pure. Simply use this mind and you will directly realize Buddhahood. The true nature of Bodhi, whether you call it the Tathagata Garbha or the purity of the Dharma realm, it's just that sentient beings have not realized it temporarily. In fact, its true nature has always been pure. We often say that the great perfection is originally pure as well. All the self-nature of Bodhi is originally pure. This phrase is exactly the same as the one in the Great Perfection's treasury of the Dharmadhatu treatise. Simply use this mind. If we use our own mind, just use this very mind to observe our own mind, then in that very moment, we will directly realize Buddhahood. If one can truly realize the nature of the mind, then one can attain Buddhahood right then and there. According to Vajrayana, when one recognizes the nature of the mind, it can be said that one attains Buddhahood in this very life. Some people say that the concept of attaining Buddhahood in this very life in Tibetan Buddhism is unreasonable. Actually, this kind of statement shouldn't be made. Why is that? Because in Chinese Buddhism, actually, the thought of Chan, Zen Buddhism, there is a lot of it. And in Tibetan Buddhism, the idea of attaining Buddhahood in this very life, this can also be said here. It's just that when you use your own mind to observe your own mind, or by extension, when you observe all phenomena in this way, you can become a Buddha in that very moment. If we talk about directly realizing Buddhahood, it doesn't say that you have to wait until the next life or after countless eons to become a Buddha. So attaining Buddhahood in this very life, as I mentioned before in my treatise on dispelling doubts about esoteric Buddhism, I cited the teachings of many great masters of Chan Buddhism, as well as some of their statements. After quoting them, I made comparisons between them. When necessary, these may serve as valuable references for everyone. In this verse, the first thing to understand is that the sixth patriarch was extremely humble at the time. If it were someone else with over 1,000 people beneath him, he might have put himself on a pedestal and looked down on them. Generally, the term spiritual friend is used to refer to one's own teacher or the most revered guru. A true spiritual friend is someone who genuinely guides you on the path to liberation. This is also how spiritual friends are described in the Avatamsaka Sutra and the Lotus Sutra. It should refer to those who open the path of liberation for sentient beings. They are called spiritual friends. But he was extremely humble. He said, "All of you here are my spiritual friends." In the future, no matter which Dharma teacher it is, the respect shown to everyone, humility and devotion in one's own mind are very important. Sometimes I think back to when I first came to the academy. I didn't understand anything about Buddhism at all. Although I had believed in Buddhism since I was young, I really didn't understand anything. Looking back now, I feel ashamed of some of my actions and words at that time. I thought I understood everything, but in reality, I understood nothing. But many of the things I said back then were indeed very unreasonable. So some of us lack cultivation and experience in this area. When we have just a little bit of knowledge, we don't take others seriously. Now, there are a few leaders and intellectuals who are like this as well. This is unreasonable. The sixth patriarch, even though he had such realization, treated everyone the same. There were still many, many good friends in the Dharma under him. Even in the following content, he refers to others as good friends in the Dharma. Here it is said that through such verses, one can understand the most ultimate thought of Chan Buddhism. What is the most ultimate thought? First, we need to understand this. It is to realize our true nature through our own mind. The Jingda record of the transmission of the lamp also contains similar words. All Buddha Dharma is inherently present in one's own mind. If you seek it outside your mind, it is like abandoning your father and running away. All Buddha Dharma, every single aspect of it, truly relies upon realizing it through one's own individual mind. If you were to seek some other external Buddha, a separate entity apart from your very own mind, that would be entirely unrealistic. You simply and absolutely won't find it, not anywhere at all. The great illusory net also contains similar words, because this true nature never changes. The mind of bodhicitta is forever undefiled. There are also similar teachings in the sutra requested by Bodhisattva Ocean Mind. This scriptural evidence is also very important. What does it say? Even if the vast expanse of space itself could somehow be stained, and even if the fleeting traces of birds could be clearly seen in the boundless sky, afflictions, those troubling mental states, can never truly taint the pure essence of bodhicitta, for its true nature, its inherent quality, is always and eternally pure. And perhaps there could be a time when you see the footprints of birds in the sky. But these are hypothetical statements, things that are absolutely impossible. Yet it is forever impossible for afflictions to taint bodhicitta. Our true nature has always been pure. In the supreme secret teachings of Dzogchen, it is always emphasized that the true nature is pure. The sixth patriarch also mentioned the words true nature and purity many times in the Platform Sutra. This is extremely important. Therefore, here, everyone should understand this point. Generally, Chan Buddhism does not rely on written words, but directly points to the mind, seeing one's true nature and attaining Buddhahood. This is the principle it teaches. The so-called not relying on written words does not mean that Chan Buddhism has no written texts at all. In fact, Chan Buddhism still involves listening, contemplation, and practice. The so-called not relying on written words means that when you truly realize your own nature, actually, no words can truly express it to you. Some people misunderstand the Chan teaching of not relying on written words, thinking it means not reading books, not learning knowledge, and not engaging in listening, contemplation, and practice. If that were the case, then isn't the Platform Sutra of the sixth patriarch itself written words? And what about the teachings left behind by many other great masters? Aren't those also written words? These words are merely a means of expression. When we use a finger to point at the moon in the sky, the finger is just a way of indicating. In the same way, in Vajrayana, realization actually relies on skillful means. Everyone should be clear about this. As we just mentioned, when the sixth patriarch first arrived and sat on the Dharma seat, he shared a verse with the assembly, addressing them as good friends. Everyone might have been confused, because sometimes when we give lectures to Buddhists, it's very effective. Everyone understands the technical terms. After the lecture, you can also tell from their expressions. On one hand, everyone has confidence. On the other hand, they are quite familiar with some specialized Buddhist terms. But what is most difficult for me now is dealing with people who don't understand Buddhism. If I talk to people who don't understand Buddhism about worldly matters, like teaching them how to do business or how to build a family and career, I don't want to talk about these things. Even if I could, I wouldn't want to. Talking to them about Buddhism is like putting grass in front of a hungry dog. They don't understand anything, so sometimes people in the world, like college students, are a bit better, a bit more flexible. They look at you with a sense of curiosity. Plus, since they often attend lectures at school, they at least understand some basic classroom discipline. But there are some so-called leaders and entrepreneurs who harbor a great deal of arrogance in their hearts and can't understand certain principles. In the end, arrogance combined with ignorance, and ignorance mixed with a kind of distraction, this ends up having a big impact on those who transmit the Dharma. So, in the future, all the good spiritual friends should pay attention. The narrative then transitions as the sixth patriarch himself begins to recount the details of his own personal background and spiritual journey. This section commences with the presentation of a Chan verse, and after the completion of this verse, actually in Buddhism, it's very important to talk about one's own background. For example, in Dzogchen, when teaching the heart essence of the Guru, it begins with stories about the lineage masters. Whenever any Dharma teaching is given, there are always some stories about its lineage at the beginning. This is very important. Nowadays, some people don't even know where they suddenly appeared from. Oh, I'm an enlightened one. Who is your master? How did you seek the Dharma in the past? They have nothing to say. Oh, I just read a book and became enlightened. There are especially many people like this in the cities nowadays, and others are also suspicious. Even they themselves feel unsure whether their enlightenment is real or fake. It's hard to say. Take the sixth patriarch, for example. He first got straight to the point and directly recited a verse like this to everyone. After that, he then began to recount his entire detailed journey. He told the compelling story of his own personal background. Huineng's deeply respected father was originally from Fanyang, a distant place, but was unfortunately demoted and subsequently exiled to Lingnan, a remote region, where he became a commoner in Xinzhou. This physical body was truly unfortunate. My beloved father passed away quite early, leaving my elderly mother completely alone and utterly helpless, so we consequently moved to Nanhai. Life was exceedingly hard and profoundly impoverished, and I diligently sold firewood in the bustling market. He described this process, his own journey. What he meant was, good friends in the Dharma, you can listen carefully. First, I, Huineng, will share the entire process of practicing the Dharma and attaining the Dharma. I should first give everyone an introduction. Maybe it's the influence of the sixth patriarch. When we were in school before, some teachers, when they first arrived, would write their names on the blackboard. We once had a teacher whose surname was Niu, which means cow in Chinese. Then all of the students below would excitedly say, "Oh, look, our teacher Niu is finally here, Mu." And then Niu would respond, "Hello everyone, my dear classmates, my surname is Niu. It's a pleasure to be here." The students often couldn't hear clearly or didn't know what was going on. "Oh, Niu is here, Mu." That's how everyone was. People in this world are truly like this. Master Huineng, the sixth patriarch, said, "First, please listen carefully to how I diligently sought the Dharma and my spiritual lineage. You can get to know the whole process of how I obtained the Dharma. I, Huineng, was born to a strict yet honorable father and a loving, compassionate mother. There is indeed such a well-known saying. My esteemed father's ancestral home was originally located in Fanyang, a significant historical region. Fanyang is situated in what is now known as Hebei province, a prominent area in northern China. At that time, he was like a government official. He held a position. Later, he was demoted from his official position. If you say Zhujiang, it means he was already demoted, stripped of his former rank. Then he was exiled to Lingnan at that time, which is now the Guangdong area. It is said that back then, if many officials were not sentenced to death, they would be dismissed from their posts. Because at that particular time, the main government departments were primarily located in Xi'an and the central region. Sending them to the south was essentially leaving them to completely fend for themselves. In that place, unlike now when many wealthy people moved to the south, back then, life and everything else in the south was probably very difficult. There used to be similar situations in Tibet as well. In Tibet, when performing exorcism rituals, many tormas and food offerings would be sent to the south. When His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok went to the southern seaside, sometimes the elder himself would also wonder whether the tormas thrown by many of our Tibetan treasure revealers might have ended up here. At the southern seaside, people would often recite some mantras, and at the same time, sometimes we would pick up some stones in that place. These stones are basically like the food offerings we use. They look as if they have many handprints on them, and after picking them up, originally, the master was especially fond of all kinds of stones, but after seeing these, he seemed particularly displeased and said not to bring them back. At that time, it was certain that some accomplished practitioners had used their supernatural powers to mold them. After these stones were molded, they were offered to these spirits and deities. Why are you bringing things that belong to spirits and deities? Even I'm scared. There are things like this. At that time, his father, the sixth patriarch's father, was demoted to Lingnan. He started living as a commoner in Xinzhou. He used to have a job, but now he had already lost his position. After stepping down from his prominent position, he truly became an ordinary, everyday citizen, and their overall living situation was quite dire indeed and profoundly unfortunate. When he was merely 3 years old, his beloved father had already tragically passed away, leaving them in a difficult predicament. Only his elderly mother was left, and they depended on each other for survival, living together with his mother. Later, in the historically significant Lingnan area, they still couldn't manage to make a decent living. In the end, they eventually moved to Nanhai, which is widely said to be around the present-day Foshan town in Guangdong. There, in their desolate circumstances, they had absolutely no other viable means of livelihood available to them and could only resort to the arduous task of selling firewood every single day just to survive. They lived in extreme and pervasive poverty, a harsh reality with no other discernible sources of income whatsoever. Every single day, the devoted mother and her young son would diligently sell firewood together to get by. Throughout this entire passage, it vividly describes the family's dire situation at that particular and challenging time. At this point, we need to understand that for someone like the sixth patriarch, someone who made tremendous contributions to spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings, whose achievements were vast, once, as it is shown, truly had a very unfortunate family situation. First, his father died when he was 3 years old. Secondly, at the very beginning of their arduous journey, they undertook a truly remarkable and incredibly long migration, wandering all the way from the northern province of Hebei down to the southern region of Guangdong, covering such an immense and challenging distance. Later on, after their arrival, the mother and her young son found themselves in a dire predicament, completely without any sustainable source of income or means of financial support whatsoever. From the stories of many great masters of the past, we can see a life of considerable poverty and significant hardship is actually very much necessary for substantial future growth and development. Nowadays, some young people, especially those from relatively well-off families, these people have no sense at all of the suffering experienced by those in hardship. Some people wonder, why is there nothing to eat? Why is there nothing to wear? Many young people today are like this as well. Some parents tell their children about how hard things were in the past. And at this time, the children say, "You just had bad luck. Why didn't you have anything?" They say, "You could have made money. Why didn't you have wealth? Wealth can be found after all." A lot of people think in an overly simplistic way. Including some young people I encounter nowadays, it seems like they lack a sense of gratitude. After coming into this world, all food, clothing, and necessities, they feel that everything should be easily available, just within reach. But actually, this isn't a good thing. For people in general, sometimes the difficulties we face in life, this is also what the Kadampa teachings say. If you have never encountered any disasters or hardships in your life may not necessarily be very successful. If the path you walk is winding and your body often gets sick, we tend to think it would be best if I never got sick. We hope that our health will be good these days, and we feel a sense of joy about it. But actually, this is a kind of interference from demons. And if my health is often poor and others frequently bully me, and my life is extremely difficult, in that case, perhaps our spiritual resolve will only grow stronger and stronger. From this, we can see that Master Huineng was extremely poor at that particular time, selling firewood every single day. I truly don't know if nowadays they are filming a comprehensive Master Huineng series. The other day, Guangdong TV had a special team for this purpose. There was one before, and even our Zhibei Fawang website has posted it. But that's a very old one. The footage is basically unclear. The name of the series is The Life of the Sixth Patriarch Huineng. Now, in Guangdong, there is one because of Lingnan. It's part of their culture. They use it as a kind of calling card and can do so through the sixth patriarch. Because nowadays, many people want to make money. Their main goal is to create something about the sixth patriarch. However, this team is very capable, including the director, and in many other aspects. They went to all the more than 10 provinces and cities that the sixth patriarch had visited back then. After going, they also interviewed the relevant people. At that time, they asked me, this comprehensive documentary would realistically be about 6 full episodes if they were ever to truly make it. They specifically asked if I had any thoughtful suggestions, and I believe it was sometime last year when they inquired. I said at the time, if you want to film it, it's best to follow the example of the great Buddhist masters. The sixth patriarch is someone everyone has faith in, so if you film it, I don't have much else to add, but it must be reliable. It's best to include credible history. If something isn't mentioned in the sources, it's best not to add it in. Especially now, in many biographies of great masters, it seems that film directors often bring their own habits into it, including portraying extreme emotional pain and suffering as if it looks like he is also just maybe appearing as an ordinary person on the surface. But to the world, it's like many movies in the past that were filmed this way. There was no such thing in history at all. What kind of emotional problems he encountered, how extremely distressed he was at the time. These things, not only do people later on fail to develop faith, on the contrary, they feel as if he's even more pitiable than an ordinary person. I would say in this situation, my only suggestion is that it's best, since everyone has faith in the sixth patriarch, it should be filmed as a very authentic historical account. If there really is such a chapter in the actual stories, then it's fine to include it, as long as it's based on reliable history. If not, it's best not to make it too secularized. If it's too secularized, it comes across as a bit unprofessional. But I don't know. That day they said it would be released sometime this year, but it seems it hasn't come out yet. And even after it's released, we don't know how it will turn out. From what we've seen, there are still many situations that are quite, from the perspective of Buddhist professionals, there are still some aspects. Actually, it's quite evident that a significant portion of today's contemporary media landscape, encompassing various forms such as certain movies and television shows, continues to be influenced by the creative visions and editorial decisions of their directors and chief editors, who play crucial roles in shaping the final output and overall message conveyed to audiences. Actually, these things could be included. For example, the father passed away and the mother and others were together. If certain parts really need to be filmed, it should be possible. There are still some very exciting and compelling storylines that continue to unfold, and indeed, there absolutely should be. He embarked on a challenging journey to the remote South Sea area, where he subsequently lived a remarkably arduous and demanding existence alongside many other individuals who shared similar fates and struggles. At that time, a customer came to buy firewood and asked Huineng to deliver it to the inn. After the customer received the firewood and Huineng got the money, he stepped outside and saw another guest reciting a sutra. As soon as Huineng heard the words of the sutra, his mind was immediately enlightened. So he asked, "Which sutra are you reciting?" The entire unfolding process of events transpired in the following manner. While he was residing and living there at a particular point in time, a distinguished guest found himself in a situation where he urgently needed to acquire and purchase some firewood. Consequently, he then specifically requested and asked Huineng to personally transport and deliver the necessary firewood to his designated lodging establishment, which was an inn. After delivering the firewood to the inn and handing it over to the guest had already completed the payment to him, settling the transaction fully and ensuring all dues were met. After Huineng received the money, carefully acknowledging the exchange, he promptly started to make his way out of the establishment. As he stepped outside, he immediately noticed another guest deeply engrossed and intently reciting a sacred sutra with great devotion. At that time, the sixth patriarch was illiterate. He had never diligently studied any formal teachings or acquired any significant knowledge whatsoever. This is precisely how his entire story was recounted at that particular time. At that moment, as soon as Huineng heard the sound of the sutra, his mind was immediately enlightened. Of course, there are indeed many different interpretations and understandings of his profound enlightenment. Of course, this can also be considered a relatively high level of enlightenment. Later, he had many conversations with the fifth patriarch, and judging from these exchanges, if he had not attained some degree of enlightenment or possessed some knowledge, he probably wouldn't have been able to say those things. But whether it was truly the highest state of so-called seeing one's true nature or becoming a Buddha by realizing one's nature is something that later generations may need to further explore. Because at that time, in fact, the circumstances were particularly subtle and intricate. As everyone knows, he went to sell firewood and the customer had already paid him. Just as he was about to leave, he saw someone reciting the Diamond Sutra at the doorway. At that moment, he heard the Diamond Sutra being recited. Later on, we will still talk about the places where he attained enlightenment. At that moment, his mind was instantly awakened. He immediately asked, what scripture are you reciting? The person replied, "The Diamond Sutra." The Diamond Sutra has a translation by Xuanzang of the Tang dynasty and also one by Kumarajiva. It is said that the version the sixth patriarch heard was the one translated by Kumarajiva. From this profound observation, we can clearly discern and understand that, on the one hand, he genuinely and truly attained a state of profound spiritual enlightenment at that particular moment in time, and consequently, the depth and magnitude of his spiritual realization must have been extraordinarily high and exceptionally profound. Even now, occasionally, there are a few rare individuals who, like the sixth patriarch, truly reach some level of realization. Relying on others reciting sutras, receiving blessings, or through some form of demonstration or instruction, one can truly recognize the nature of one's own mind. Such phenomena are actually not very difficult to encounter, especially with the blessings of lineage masters in Vajrayana Buddhism, as seen in the biographies of some great masters and eminent monks from India and Tibet. For those with sharp faculties or karmic connections from past lives, it should not be very difficult. However, at this point, no matter how high your realization or enlightenment may be, when you explain it to others, you shouldn't set the level too high. For example, you may have truly realized the emptiness of all phenomena, but this is merely your own experience of emptiness, where everything appears as empty in your own perception. However, if you keep telling others about it in this way, it's very likely that others won't be able to accept it. That's why nowadays, in some places, there is often what is called wild Zen, where things like karma, reincarnation, good and evil are all completely denied. As for whether one has truly attained seeing one's true nature and becoming enlightened, it's actually very hard to say. So in these situations, in which circumstances is it really that everything is non-existent? And in which circumstances does everything exist? This is something that even the great masters of Chan Buddhism should acknowledge. If they don't acknowledge this, it will indeed be very difficult to spread the Dharma. In the past, Bodhisattva Asvaghosha, you may have read the Chronicle of the Buddhas and Patriarchs, which mentions this. At first, Bodhisattva Asvaghosha was a devoted follower of Brahmanism. In the very beginning, he was extremely arrogant and full of pride. Because he firmly believed in the existence of an eternal, unchanging self, he went around everywhere proclaiming his views. If there is anyone in this world who can debate with me, and if I lose, I am willing to have my head cut off and use my own head as proof of the wager. He went around proclaiming this. Later, he heard that in the eastern part of India, there was another great Buddhist master, a revered figure known for his profound spiritual wisdom and teachings, named Venerable Punyayashas. This esteemed Venerable Punyayashas was, at that particular time, actively engaged in teaching the fundamental and intricate doctrine of non-self, a core principle within Buddhist philosophy that emphasizes the absence of a permanent, unchanging self or soul. At that time, Asvaghosha, who was not yet called a bodhisattva, was very pleased. He said he definitely wanted to debate with him. He asserted that the self exists, while Venerable Punyayashas claimed there is no self. He said, "If you win, I will give you my head." Later, they began the debate. During the debate, Venerable Punyayashas said, "In the conventional reality of appearances, the self should exist and all phenomena also exist. I do not deny their existence. But in the ultimate truth, everything is quiescent and non-existent. The self does not exist, nor do all phenomena." He immediately distinguished between the two truths. Asvaghosha was at a loss. No matter how he argued or what he said, he could not refute it. He was also a wise person and recognized that he had been completely defeated. So he agreed and said, "You may cut off my head." Everything that needed to be said had already been said before. Later, Venerable Yasha said, "In Buddhism we teach compassion. You should be allowed to enter the Dharma." The Buddha also prophesied that 600 years later, a bodhisattva named Asvaghosha would enter Buddhism. He also demonstrated some miraculous powers. At that time, when Venerable Yasha went into the cave, Asvaghosha had already become a monk, but in his heart he was still unconvinced. He felt that he had only lost to him in theory, and that Buddhism might not necessarily have such high attainments in practice. Later, inside a cave, it was pitch dark all around. He said, "What should we do when we can't see anything?" Venerable Yasha's fingertip began to emit light. At that moment, Asvaghosha thought he must be using some kind of illusion. He thought, "As long as I know it's an illusion, it will disappear. I should recognize that it's an illusion." In his heart, he thought, "It must be an illusion, now I know." But instead, the light grew brighter and brighter, burning ever more intensely. Whether in terms of debating wisdom or the level of realization, he could not out-argue Buddhism. Later, in front of Buddhism, he truly took refuge and became a monk. Afterwards, he went into the city himself to spread the teachings of suffering, emptiness, and non-self. It is also said that 500 princes attained enlightenment at the same time. So from this, we can see that no matter which great master from any era it is, as for enlightenment, just as Guru Padmasambhava said, your view should be as vast as the sky, yet your discernment of cause and effect should be as meticulous as fine powder. In this way, it aligns with the proper principles. Therefore, whether it's Chan Buddhism or not, in fact, regarding Chan Buddhism in Tibet, there was a debate between the Mahayana Chan school and Kamalashla at that time, and there are various historical accounts from different scholars about this, but we won't discuss that for now. In fact, what should we understand in this situation? If one is enlightened, one should still understand how to discern right and wrong in the mundane world. At that time, the sixth patriarch had actually already attained enlightenment, but even after his enlightenment, he still sought out wise teachers. This is also a kind of demonstration, and everyone should be clear about this. Just now, he asked what scripture this was, and was told it was the Diamond Sutra. He asked again with a genuine inquiry, "Where exactly did you come from, bringing forth this sacred scripture?" At that very moment, Huineng then asked the visitor once more, "Where did you come from, and how did you obtain the scripture you are carrying?" He asked this question. The visitor replied, I came from Dongchan Monastery in Huangmei County, Qizhou. That monastery is where the fifth patriarch, Master Ren, teaches and guides over 1,000 disciples. I went there to pay my respects and to listen to this sutra. The master often encourages both monks and lay people, saying that as long as one recites the Diamond Sutra, one will naturally see one's true nature and directly attain Buddhahood. This part is a bit hard to read. I haven't looked at it, but I think I should be able to read it. This basically means asking, where did you get this scripture from? At that time, the visitor said, I came from Dongchan Monastery in Huangmei County, Qizhou. That's the present-day Huangmei area. In that monastery, the fifth patriarch, Master Hongren, is the abbot there. He teaches and transforms many sentient beings, and he has over 1,000 disciples under him. I went there to pay respects to this master and listen to the Diamond Sutra. The venerable master, with profound wisdom, advised all lay people and devoted monastics to definitely and diligently uphold the sacred Diamond Sutra, a scripture of immense spiritual significance. If anyone can uphold the Diamond Sutra, they will be able to see their true nature and immediately attain Buddhahood. The master has always promoted it in this way. So historically speaking, this is indeed the case in Han region, including within the Chan Zen tradition. As I just mentioned, the sixth patriarch, Chan Master, he also spent 36 years in that monastery, teaching and expounding the Dharma. The fifth patriarch also taught the Diamond Sutra. He consistently required his disciples to diligently read and thoroughly study this important sutra. It appears that this significant tradition regrettably no longer exists or is widely practiced in the present day, which is truly a profound and lamentable pity. Now, it seems that many people, for example, just go somewhere to practice meditation. There's no such idea as, I'm going somewhere to receive a particular teaching. But in our Tibetan region, this is quite common. I want to go to a certain place. I want to listen to this teaching from the beginning to the end of the teaching. After I have received it all, I feel happy myself and feel that my life has meaning. I have received this teaching. I have received that teaching. But now in many Buddhist academies, many Han Chinese areas, and even some temples, it seems that in daily conversations with these great masters and with many people, no one says, I want to request a certain teaching. It seems that both the idea and the act of seeking teachings have basically disappeared. Perhaps even before the Cultural Revolution, this tradition was already rather weak. After the Cultural Revolution, most people probably just focused on building temples. But building temples is only about the external structures. What is most fundamental is our inner knowledge and inner wisdom. This is very important. If we do not listen to teachings or study the scriptures, today I read in the Tibetan version of the Narayana Prasna Sutra, it says, if we listen to the Dharma, we can increase our wisdom. If our wisdom increases, our afflictions will decrease. When our afflictions decrease, all evil influences and heretical paths will have no opportunity to take hold. I think this scriptural teaching is very good. Indeed, many of us nowadays are deeply troubled by afflictions. We need to listen to the Dharma in order to eliminate the various afflictions that continue within us. So, what kind of news did he hear at that time? It was about the events that took place in the entire monastery of the fifth patriarch. How did he spread the teachings? This process has already been explained. When Huineng heard this, because of karmic connections from past lives, he was fortunate to receive 10 taels of silver from a benefactor who told him to use it for his elderly mother's clothing and food, and instructed him to go to Huangmei to pay respects to the fifth patriarch. After Huineng heard this, due to causes and conditions from previous lives, he immediately wanted to go. However, going there was difficult, as he had only his mother to rely on and no other support. Later, perhaps it was another guest or another benefactor who helped him, thanks to the kindness of another guest, or perhaps it was the same person. Either way, it was possible. He generously gave 10 taels of silver to Master Huineng at that particular time. This kind act allowed Huineng's mother to be properly taken care of in her daily life. After that, he then told Huineng to go to Huangmei to become a devoted disciple of the fifth patriarch. After carefully arranging for his beloved mother's well-being, Huineng immediately took his solemn leave, and in just a little over 30 days, he diligently arrived at Huangmei to respectfully pay his profound respects to the venerable fifth patriarch. Just now, as for Master Huineng at that time, actually, these passages also talk a lot about his filial piety toward his mother and so on. Huineng took the 10 taels of silver. Actually, whether 10 taels of silver could support his mother's living expenses for a long time is hard to say. But when he needed to leave, there also had to be a kind of karmic condition. So for many of us monastics, when it's time to leave, sometimes our parents, especially nowadays, many only children also face certain difficulties. But in any case, at that time, Huineng gave the 10 taels of silver to his mother, as mentioned earlier. After saying his farewells and parting from his mother, he set out from Lingnan, or you could say Nanhai, and traveled from there to Huangmei. It took him less than 30 days to arrive, even though back then traveling on foot took a very long time. Nowadays, no matter where you go to seek the Dharma, you might take a plane or a car, and it wouldn't take 30 days. He probably walked for an arduous and challenging period of around 30 days, enduring various hardships along the way, and finally, with unwavering determination, arrived at Huangmei to respectfully pay his profound respects to the esteemed fifth patriarch. So, throughout this entire and remarkable process, one could unequivocally say that it vividly demonstrates and profoundly illustrates how deeply he relied upon the guidance and wisdom of a truly good and compassionate spiritual teacher. We often say that when you hear the name of a master, just like when Milarepa heard the name of Marpa Lotsawa, he was filled with great joy and developed boundless respect. So the fifth patriarch and the sixth patriarch also had karmic connections from past lives. After hearing the Dharma name of the master, he immediately wanted to go himself. And just at that time, all the right conditions came together. In fact, there were certain karmic connections between them. I think many of us here, monastics and lay Buddhists alike, have our own unique karmic connections. Some people came to Buddhism after reading a book, while others met a friend who introduced them. Originally, they didn't even believe in Buddhism, but then, by some chance opportunity, back when I was editing Waves on the Sea of Wisdom, I interviewed many intellectuals at the time. I felt then that everyone's karmic connections were truly rare and precious. Each person has their own unique circumstances that led them to have faith in Buddhism. With different karmic conditions, some eventually became monastics or took lay precepts. These karmic connections are extremely precious to us. If we didn't have these connections, it's very possible that in such circles, you might have encountered bad people or read harmful books. In the end, it could even lead to ruin for lifetimes to come. This is a real possibility. So I think for many of our Dharma friends here, the entire profound process of the sixth patriarch, relying upon a truly spiritual teacher, some of his deeply personal experiences can also serve as a valuable mirror for our own spiritual lives. So what exactly was the sixth patriarch describing to his devoted disciples at that particular time? It was the process of his quest for the Dharma. Therefore, for each of us in the future, whether or not we have the opportunity to spread the Dharma, or if we truly receive a pure lineage ourselves, keeping such records is very important. With the passage of time, many things may be forgotten eventually, but at the time, you remember them very clearly. For example, when you went to a certain place at a certain time, what kind of Dharma you sought and received there. And after obtaining this Dharma, as long as all the necessary conditions are met in the future, you can pass it on to others first. This is also something very worthwhile for everyone to do. If you only receive the Dharma for yourself, of course, even then, you are planting virtuous roots and accumulating merit for countless future lives in your continuum. And this itself is an immense merit. But most fundamentally, the Dharma we receive, you yourself should regard it as extremely precious. After obtaining each teaching, you should feel a sense of joy. I have now completely and perfectly received it all. After receiving it, I reflect on how I should practice and how to tame my own mind. At the same time, when you have even a little experience or insight in this area, you should also share it with all sentient beings. From the preceding passages, we can clearly and basically see this principle. Just now, the sixth patriarch briefly recounted his own personal experiences to others. Upon hearing the revered name of the esteemed master, he carefully arranged all necessary matters for his beloved mother's well-being. After ensuring everything was taken care of, he then embarked on a journey to personally visit the venerable fifth patriarch. For the moment, we shall pause our narrative at this significant juncture.
Bandhangara Padma Sodargye